that Maher deliberately went there knowing he would piss off all the wokies, and they're pissed off, for bending the knee to Trump.
I never talk to the enemy. That's the first commandment of woke politics. Bill Maher just shattered it by dining with President Trump. He brought a list of Trump's insults for the president to sign. Trump signed it with a smile and showed him the Lincoln bedroom. This is how you defeat the outrage machine that's dividing America.
Obviously, a very big liberal, been very hard on the president, but he's donated a lot of money to other politicians. You know, you've had Biden, Clinton, Obama, everybody. He had never been to the White House, and the president was so gracious. He took us up to the private residence. We saw the Gettysburg Address in the Lincoln bedroom, and I was like, "You've never been here, Bill?" And I was like, "How about this, President Trump? You know, extending this olive branch, and we talked about things we had in common. You know, ending wokeness. You know, securing the border." You know, the president was asking him what he thought about policy, you know, going on with Iran and Israel and things. It just it blew my mind.
Now, I really wish I'd been at that dinner, because the idea of Kid Rock, Dana White, Donald Trump, Bill Maher, that's a fun dinner. But secondly, it's interesting that Maher deliberately went there knowing he would piss off all the wokies, and they're pissed off, for bending the knee to Trump. The MAGA crowd are pissed off because they don't think the president should be entertaining dinner at the White House with a man who once said he'd donate $5 million to a charity if Trump could prove he wasn't the...
So Bill Maher, the host of HBO's Real Time, a guy who's been a staunch liberal for decades, accepted an invitation to the White House from President Trump. They had dinner together along with Kid Rock and Dana White. Let that sink in for a moment. This isn't just any liberal we're talking about. This is a man who once compared Trump to an orangutan, a man who repeatedly mocked Trump supporters, a man who suffered from one of the worst cases of Trump derangement syndrome I've seen in media. Yet there he was, breaking bread with the president, in the Lincoln bedroom, looking at the Gettysburg Address and discussing policy on Iran, Israel, and border security. What's remarkable here isn't just that the meeting happened, it's the reaction it triggered. The woke left is absolutely losing their minds. Why? Because they can't stand the idea of dialogue. They can't tolerate the concept that maybe, just maybe, we can talk to people with different viewpoints.
Of his mother having sex with an orangutan. So on all sides, Bill Maher was copying it, as he knew he would, but he still went. And the thing that really struck me, Megyn, was he'd been a big donor to, I think, to Biden, to Obama, to the Clintons and others. He'd never been to the White House before. It took Donald Trump to invite him there, and despite the fact that every week on his show, Bill Maher hammers him. What did you think of it?
Yeah. I mean, as you and I both know, Trump is quick to make up with the people he's irritated with, as long as you show him good humor and good grace. You know, as long as you don't hold a grudge, he doesn't hold a grudge. Yeah. I mean, I think we can both speak to that personally. And I think the same is true with Bill Maher. Trump is better at it than anyone. So the question was really, is Bill Maher any good at it? You know, will Bill Maher be able to go in there and be nice to Trump? And I'd love to hear more about Bill's own experience. He says he'll speak to it on his show this Friday. But that's been my one problem with Bill.
Well, actually,
I
can tell you,
he's like you and I
he's
are.
actually doing it. Yeah, well, he's doing it, I think, he's not on this Friday. I think he's on the Friday after, and by coincidence, I'm doing that show. So I'm going to hear it sitting next to him. It should be, and I'm really interested.
Yeah, both of those.
I think it was a good thing to do.
Here's the problem with Bill. So he's been with us on the anti-wokeness front. He's been fighting those wars just as long as we have. He's against that nonsense on gender, on the DEI stuff. But with respect to Bill, he has TDS, and it's been rather severe, Trump derangement syndrome. And it's been the one thing that he just cannot see clearly through. And this isn't long ago. You know, he came on my show just before the election, a few months before the election. And as soon as I, made clear I was supporting Trump, like, he couldn't even really look at me. He seemed irritated. And I like Bill, but he really can't stand Donald Trump.
Let's be honest about what's happening here. The woke left is imploding before our eyes. They've built their entire identity around hating Trump and anyone associated with him. It's not about policy for them. It's about belonging to the right tribe. So when one of their own, especially someone as influential as Bill Maher, decides to have a civil conversation with the enemy, their entire worldview starts to crumble. It challenges the foundation of their political religion. Maher has been drifting away from the woke cult for years now. He's criticized cancel culture, gender ideology, and the extremism that's taken over the Democratic Party. But this, dinner with Trump, this is different. This is a line in the sand. The left's reaction tells you everything you need to know about where we are as a country. They're not interested in healing divisions. They profit from them. They're not interested in finding common ground. They want compliance.
Crazy and fun and just loose as Kid Rock to say, come on, why don't you just meet with him for Bill to let the veil down a little and maybe take a fresh look at this guy who's been so demonized by probably everybody Bill knows socially.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he'll have Ann Coulter on his show all the time, Bill. He's not like he's against, talking or interviewing with or even dining with conservatives, but he has had an issue with Trump. That's why I'll be riveted to know what actually happened over dinner.
Well, I heard the one piece of news I heard was that Bill showed up with a piece of paper that had all the terrible things that Trump had said about Bill Maher on it, and he showed it to Trump, and Trump signed it.
I love that.
Now, some people are questioning whether Maher is just being an opportunist. Is he genuinely having a change of heart, or is he just chasing ratings? I've thought about this a lot, and here's my take. Bill Maher is a comedian and social commentator who's been in the game for decades. He's watched the Democratic Party slide further and further into insanity, and he's been increasingly vocal about it. Remember when liberals stood for free speech? Maher does. Remember when the left could take a joke? Maher does. What we're witnessing isn't Maher suddenly becoming conservative. It's Maher staying consistent while his party leaves him behind. He's still the same guy who supports legalized marijuana, criticizes religion, and holds many traditionally liberal positions. But he's also someone who recognizes when his side has gone too far. And that's precisely what's happened with today's left. They've gone so far off the deep end that reasonable liberals like Maher can no longer defend them. When your political movement starts to resemble a cult more than a party, you got a problem. We need to talk about the strategic brilliance of President Trump here. While the Democrats have been busy building walls between Americans, Trump has been building bridges. Think about it. Trump has brought together figures as diverse as Elon Musk, RFK Jr., and now Bill Maher. Trump understands something fundamental about American politics that the Democrats have forgotten. Most Americans just want to live their lives in peace. They're tired of the constant division. They're exhausted by the endless culture wars. They want leaders who will focus on issues that actually matter. The economy, border security, national defense. By inviting Maher to the White House, Trump once again demonstrates his willingness to engage with critics. Can you imagine Biden doing the same? Would Kamala Harris ever invite a prominent conservative critic to the White House for a civil discussion? Of course not. They're too busy labeling half the country as threats to democracy. This is why Trump won in November. It wasn't just about policy. It was about approach. Americans are hungry for a leader who doesn't treat political opponents like enemies of the state.
Let's talk about Cory Booker for a moment, because I don't know what you thought, but watching Cory Booker speak for a whole day, 24 hours, let's have a clip of some of it.
Would the senator yield for a question?
Chuck Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
I just want to tell you a question. Do you know you have just broken the record? Do you know how proud this caucus is of you? Do you know how proud America is of you?
Now, part of me was like, what a lot of pointless. Yeah, I know. And part of it is very irritating. I completely get that. But was there also a slight method to his madness?
What we're seeing right now is the formation of what I call the anti-woke coalition. It's not strictly partisan. It includes traditional conservatives, yes, but also classical liberals, independents, and even former progressives who've grown disgusted with the direction of the modern left. Bill Maher is just one example. Look at Joe Rogan, who hosts the biggest podcast in the world and regularly platforming voices from across the political spectrum. Look at Elon Musk, who was once celebrated by the left, but is now considered a pariah because he dares to question their orthodoxy. Look at comedians like Dave Chappelle and Ricky Gervais who refuse to bow to the mob. These aren't right-wingers by any stretch of the imagination, but they share something important, a commitment to free thought and a rejection of ideological purity tests. And this is terrifying to the woke left. Why? Because their power depends on controlling the narrative. It depends on making people afraid to speak up, afraid to question, afraid to think for themselves. When influential figures like Bill Maher break ranks, it gives others permission to do the same. That's why they're so desperate to punish anyone who steps out of line. That's why they'll try to cancel Maher for this dinner. Not because he's suddenly embraced conservative policies, but because he's committed the cardinal sin in their religion. He's engaged with the enemy. There's something bigger happening here, and it goes beyond Bill Maher or even President Trump. We're witnessing a fundamental realignment in American politics. The old left-right divide is becoming less relevant. The new dividing line is between those who believe in American principles, free speech, individual liberty, equal opportunity, and those who want to tear down these principles in service of their utopian vision. For years, the woke left has been winning the culture war. They've captured our institutions, the media, academia, Hollywood, even corporate America. They've used their power to silence dissent and enforce conformity, but the tide is turning. Americans are waking up to the dangers of wokeism. They're seeing how it divides us, how it reduces people to their immutable characteristics, how it rejects dialogue in favor of demonization. The dinner between Trump and Maher is a symbol of his turning tide. It represents a willingness to reach across the divide, to find common ground, to recognize our shared humanity, even amid our disagreements. So what does this mean for us? How should we respond to this moment? First, we should celebrate it. We should applaud Bill Maher for having the courage to do what many on his side refuse to do, engage with the other side. We should commend President Trump for extending the invitation, for showing the kind of leadership that seeks to unite rather than divide. Second, we should follow their example. In our own lives, we should be willing to have conversations with people who see the world differently. We should listen more than we speak. We should seek to understand before we seek to be understood. And finally, we should recognize that the fight against wokeism isn't just a political battle. It's a cultural one. It's about what kind of society we want to live in. Do we want a society where people are afraid to speak their minds, where conformity is valued over individuality, where we judge people by their group identity rather than their character? Or do we want a society that embraces robust debate, that values free thought, that recognizes our common humanity across political divides? I know which society I choose, and if the reaction to the Trump-Maher dinner is any indication, more and more Americans are choosing it too. The woke left is losing. They know it, and that's why they're panicking, but their panic is just confirmation that we're on the right track. So let's keep pushing, let's keep speaking truth, and let's keep building bridges across the political divide, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. And no matter how much the woke mob tries to divide us, that common bond is stronger than any political disagreement. That's it for today, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Leave a comment below letting me know what you think about Bill Maher's meeting with Trump. Was it a genuine change of heart or just political opportunism? I want to hear your thoughts. And remember, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Black Coffee Podcast, bringing you the conversations that matter. Until then, stay strong, stay free, and never apologize for speaking the truth.